I'm so excited that you're here for the wrap-up to our Problem of God series. And as our campuses sync up live, and those of you watch or listen online, on demand, or live online, welcome to the live wrap-up of Problem of God. And for the last 6 weeks, we have been working through this book by Mark Clark and some of the ideas in it. And I'm so excited that Mark's here in person to be able to wrap up the series. So Mark and his wife, Erin, are here. 8 years ago, they started Village Church in Vancouver, BC, and God has used it in a really, really powerful way. They now meet on 4 locations in 2 provinces, 5,000 people every weekend, a lot of them finding their way back to God or finding their way to God for the first time. And we're just so excited to have Mark here. So will you please give him a warm Connexus welcome as he wraps up the series.
Thanks, brother. All right, good to be with you guys. If you have a Bible, John chapter 1 will kind of play the backdrop, so you can open up there. Good to be with you. Originally, I am from actually Ontario, Ajax, Ontario. I don't know if there's holla. All right, so awesome. My wife and I moved out to Vancouver in 2004. The plan was to be there for a couple of years and then move on. And the Lord said, stay, plant a church, which we kind of said, well, this is going to stink because there's no Christians in Vancouver. There's just people who believe in if they eat kale and wear Lululemon pants and carry a water bottle, they connect to the universe or something. And so now I've got to, take them from that and show them that generic spirituality actually doesn't save you, that you got to get more specific. You actually have to talk about Jesus and who he is and what he's done. And of course, that's kind of the backdrop to this particular question that we're closing the series off with, the problem of exclusivity, which is this idea that Jesus is the only way to connect to the God of the universe. That there's a very narrow route, there's a gate, there's a person, and his name is Jesus. And that's the only way, which by default means that if you don't believe in Jesus, that you're wrong, that you actually don't connect to the God of the universe, you don't end up having salvation, you don't go to heaven, your sins are forgiven. So obviously that idea is packed with all kinds of offense. It's like a scandalous idea. The idea that you would say that you're right and somebody else is wrong is awful to a Canadian mind, because the Canadian framework of thinking is that everybody's kind of right? We're all right about our different ways to God. We just have all different ways. But at the end of the day, everybody's right. And so maybe you're here and you're wondering about that. That's what we're going to kind of hit on today. My background, like you, for those of you exploring Christianity, is that I didn't grow up in the church at all. First time I went to a church, I was 19 years old, became a Christian when I was about 17 or 18. Grew up in a very atheistic home, so atheistic. My father, actually, my brother's name is Matthew, and my father was so ardently against Christianity that he said we have to spell Matthew's name with 1 T so that it's not biblical, because the Gospel of Matthew spells it with 2 T's. 4 years later, they had me and named me Mark. So clearly he'd never opened a Bible before. The irony was missed on him. If I had another brother, he'd say, Luke, I think Luke's a good name. Hello, John. Welcome to the family. I literally never opened a Bible in his life. So I have always been a skeptic. I always needed evidence to believe in anything. When I was a kid, I actually used to go behind my buddy's bicycle on my rollerblades with a big rope, and my mom would come and say, don't do that, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. I go, where's the evidence for this? And I just go on, and then one day, he was going around a corner, and I shot out, and there was a car coming right at me. And I went down and just skidded along the asphalt and stopped underneath the engine of the car as it ran over me. And I remember looking up, and the first thing I thought was evidence. All right, meaning I don't believe anything until I actually see it. And that's probably some of you. You're skeptics. That was me growing up. And so when I started to explore Christianity, I was 15 years old when my father passed away. And I was kind of standing over his casket with all the history of the things I'd been through. And I started to ask the big questions. Origins, meaning, morality, destiny. Is there meaning to the universe? Where do I come from? Why do I believe in right and wrong? Where are we actually going? My parents divorced when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And the trauma of that event actually caused me to get Tourette syndrome. So I don't know if you guys know what Tourette syndrome is, but it's basically how not to be cool in high school, because I would just do a whole bunch of crazy habits and tics all the time. And you can see I still do it with my face a little bit. And I would swear randomly. I would just be at a bus stop and be like, F-bomb, F. I wouldn't say the word F. That's just because you're nice Christian people. But I'm saying I would swear, randomly. So I remember being in classrooms where it was dead silent. We'd be doing an exam, and it'd be we'd be sitting there, and it'd be F, all right? And then be like, oh, there's Mark swearing. And so the one job you're never going to have when you randomly throw F-bombs out at people is a pastor, all right? That's never going to happen, all right? It's never going to take place that you're on a stage preaching at people, because that'll be the craziest church ever. That'll be like, you have to be 19 to get into the church, because he just, right? And you never know when it's going to happen. So anyways, God uses, and some of you need to hear this right now. Maybe this is the only thing you hear, because you're here and you're actually doubting whether God would ever be interested in a person like you, a disaster like you. And you are a disaster, by the way. I don't know if Carrie tells you this, but I tell this to my church all the time. You're a wreck. Like, I'm surprised you got your pants on and got here. You are so sinful and turned in on yourself. Martin Luther defined sin as homo incurvatus, humankind turned in on himself. There's a verse in the Bible where Jesus looks at a church and he says, "You're wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked." And that's our life verse as a church. I just tell my church every week, like, you're wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. Welcome to Village Church. All right, so hopefully you feel welcome. But understanding that about yourself is really important, because that's when Jesus and what he did looks glorious. And what we have to understand, when Jesus looks at us, he says, wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. What he's saying is we have a tendency in ourselves to actually just do things that feel really comfortable to us. And that's the ultimate danger when it comes to this question. Because you and I as Canadians might feel like inclusiveness in regard to philosophy and theology is good and important and necessary in order to have a good flourishing society. So let's just say, so if atheism says that all religions are false, inclusivism or pluralism says that all religions are true. And so we might say to ourselves, this idea feels good. But the first pushback to this, in this conversation, this dialogue, if this is a question you might have, is to understand that there are things in life that don't always feel good, but that are true, right? You can't just go through life saying, I'm only going to believe things that feel really good, because there's a lot of things in life that are right and true, but they don't necessarily feel very good. Just because something leaves a bad taste in your mouth doesn't mean it's necessarily false. So when we're trying to answer, my kids would eat ice cream 3 meals a day and have diabetes by the time they're 30 and be gone. You know, if I just left them free will, do what you want. But it feels really bad to eat vegetables. It feels awful, but it's still right. I run a church, and sometimes it's the right thing to let somebody go, but it never feels good. So you and I as Canadians have to be very careful, because what happens to us is we get a cultural ethos and a cultural worldview that starts to seep into our brain. And we get it through just sitting around, talking to each other, eating meals, watching TV, driving by billboards. Over time, what happens is a cultural brainwash, where we begin to really believe what our cultural moment says is right. My family aren't Christians. And so when I tell my kid, I have 3 girls, 11, 9, and 7. And when I tell them about Jesus, my family looks at me, when you read your Bible stories at night, when you tell your kids about, when you pray around the table, do you understand you're brainwashing your kids? And you know what I say to that every time they say that to me? You're darn right I am. Because that's my job. Because if I don't, then Grey's Anatomy will, or Beyonce will, right? It's like, this is what sexuality is. This is what womanhood is. This is what power is. This is how you live your life. This is reality. This is how you should think about God. And that's the moment we're in right now. How do you think about God? Well, let's just say everybody's right. Let's just say everybody's true, because exclusivity feels like it's not really a nice thing to believe. The first thing you got to push back against yourself is, just because something might not feel right doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong. You have to go deeper. You have to go further. I'll give you a couple quotes to kind of frame this worldview for us. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach says this: I am absolutely against any religion that says one faith is superior to another. I don't see how that's anything different than spiritual racism. Mahatma Gandhi said, my position is that all great religions are fundamentally equal. Theologian Oprah Winfrey says, one of the biggest mistakes humans make is to believe there's only one way. Actually, there are many diverse paths to God, right? This is, to use a more, something that you might connect with more. Who's seen Ricky Bobby, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby, all right? The movie, Will Ferrell, right? All right, he's in his car. This is the heresy of Ricky Bobby, right? He's in his car. He gets on fire. He jumps out. He thinks he's on fire, and he's running around in his underwear, and he's trying to go like, help me. And so what does he do? He cries out. He says, help me, Jewish God. Help me, Allah. Help me, Tom Cruise. You do witchcraft on me. Help me, Oprah Winfrey. All right, that's what he says. All right, because what he's saying is, me hedge my bets, because if this God is true, it doesn't necessarily mean that this God isn't true. Maybe they can all be true at the same time. That's a cultural moment we're in, and that's what feels nice, because we're Canadians, right? And Canadians are like, sorry. Go ahead. Ahead of me. Because we're nice people. So to ever say something's right and something's wrong feels bad. But the first thing we got to understand is just because it's a repulsion, just because it might not feel good, doesn't mean it's not true. That's the first issue. Okay, the second issue is we can't make the mistake of cultural pluralism and metaphysical pluralism. And what I mean by this, I think the repulsion of exclusivity comes from a really good place. I think we live in a multicultural society, and I think we all recognize we have different religions, different races, different people, and so it comes from a really good heart where we're supposed to be a culture and a society that gets along, so let's just get along. And I believe in that. I think Christians should actually fight for the rights of people to believe what they want to believe. Here's the mistake, and I've done that in my life. When I was almost done college, actually, the guidance counselor came to me and said, hey, we made a mistake. You actually didn't get one of your high school credits. Like, I'm fourth year college. I'm almost done. She goes, this was like a plot to a movie. She's like, you got to go back to high school. And I'm just like waiting for the title credit, like, boom, 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 right? So I'm like, what are you even talking about right now? She's like, you got to go back to high school and finish high school. I'm like, what? So I went back to summer school, all right, for 2 months. And I'm hanging out with high school kids again, all right, for 2 straight months. I'm done college. Now, I didn't tell anybody this because I wanted to look brilliant, right? So I just went in, I'm like, I don't know, I'm just one of you guys. And like, I'm writing these essays, right? And I'm like, boom, I'm handing these kids are like, I don't know what a paragraph is, right? And I'm like, bam. I look like Rain Man handing these things. And I'm like, bam, 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 bam. And the teacher's like, why are you so brilliant? I'm like, I don't know. And then he's like, wait a minute, how old are you? I'm like, So anyway, while I was there, I actually became friends with one of the Muslim girls. And what the teacher used to do is he used to just rake Christianity over the coals right in front of everybody, make fun of it. And then I'd debate him right in front of everybody. I'd say, actually, that's not true. Like the guy in the video, maybe he's here, awesome if you are. The idea that the Gospels were written hundreds of years after the events is actually not true. The Gospels were written within 40 to 50 years of the events of Jesus' life, which means all the eyewitnesses were still alive, which is why they write names into the Gospels, by the way. If you read the Gospel of Mark and they say Alexander and Rufus, and so, because he's saying, go and ask them. These people are still alive, go and ask them what happened, which is crazy, because if you want to start a religion, it's actually better off to wait 400 years, because then everyone's dead, you can make up anything you want. But if you do it when everyone's still alive, they can go, that never happened. These crazy stories, he drowns 2,000 pigs. That would have been a big deal back then. That would have been a village's whole livelihood. And everyone would have remembered. If you're going to write that into a story and it never actually happened, you got to wait till everyone's dead and you can go, of course this happened. But it's written 40 years, everyone's passing around, they go, that never happened in my town. Drowning 2,000 pigs, that's crazy. He never fed 5,000 people, 10,000 people with a bunch. Wait till everyone's dead, you can make up whatever you want. But the gospel writers actually write it. So it's like 20, 30 years ago is probably the book of Philippians. Paul writes Philippians. So that's 20, 30 years ago. That's like the mid-90s. That's when, does anyone remember when Silence of the Lambs won Best Picture? All right, that's like the distance between when the Gospels were written and the times that the events happened. We would know, if I came and said, hey, well, there was a crazy nuclear war we had with North Korea back in 1995, you'd all be like, that's not a thing, all right? That never actually happened, all right? You can't put in a bunch of stuff that didn't happen into a document that's written and circling around during the time when everybody's alive to do it. And so we got to understand that. So he would debate all these things and say all these things. And so I started to study them. I started to go, wait, is this really in the marketplace of ideas, is Christianity the most true? And look into the Bible and look into the philosophy and look into the question of origins and meaning and morality and destiny. And so he would just hammer it and I would go deeper and study it. And so I was away one day and I came in late, and the Muslim girl was outside crying, and she ran up to me and she said, he just ripped apart my faith, told me he knows more about the Quran than I do, I can't believe it. And I went to bat for her, and I said, she has the right to believe what she is. You should not criticize her, and I want you to apologize to the class. And he got up and he apologized to the whole class. I think that's what the church needs to do. It needs to fight for people's right to believe what they want to believe in a multicultural society. That's cultural pluralism. Here's the shift that we've made. We've moved from that we've said more than just you have the right to believe what you want to believe. We've moved to what's called metaphysical pluralism, which is, and what you believe is true. That's the tragic move. Because the second thing we got to think about is what is logical. So not only does something feel good or not feel good, what's actually logical? Because in the study of philosophy, in the study of logic, there's something called the law of non-contradiction. Two things that are the opposites to each other cannot be true at the same time. Cannot be true at the same time. If you say I'm wearing socks and you say I'm not wearing socks, one of you is right and one of you is wrong. There's no use saying, but I don't want to offend them. They're nice ladies. You're both right. It's not a thing. But what we've done is we've said, I want to get along around the dinner table with my family. And so we'll just say everybody's right. Now think about this from logic. If you're sitting around and Uncle Tom goes, my worldview is we're all unicorns. That's a great worldview, Uncle Tom. That's perfect. No one's going to challenge this? No, because we don't want to offend Uncle Tom. He's a good dude. And he's getting older anyways. Let's just leave him alone. We're all unicorns. Great thought, Uncle Tom. And then what do you believe? I believe I'm made in the image of God. Boy, isn't it so nice that we're all right? Isn't it so nice that everybody's right? If atheism says everybody's wrong, pluralistic philosophy says everybody's right. And this is a tragedy. This is a bigger tragedy almost because it's not going to make us go deeper to figure out what's true. It's just going to leave us where we are right now in our cultural moment. And if our cultural moment says that we don't like the exclusivism of Christianity, because it is exclusive. Jesus comes along and he says in John 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Acts chapter 4, the apostles get up and they say there is no other name under heaven by which people can be saved. It is very tight. It is very narrow. It is very exclusive because Jesus is the only one who actually comes and dies for sin, takes away your sin if you repent and believe in him, and the veil, religion goes away when Jesus shows up. Because there's nothing we can do. See, religion says it's about what you do. The gospel says it's about what Jesus has done for you. It's not about what you can do for God. It's about what Jesus has done for you. That's a scandal. But let it scandalize you because it's logical that what we don't want to do is get ourselves into a situation where to be nice and to have a cultural pluralism, we all just say one another's right. If our ideas fundamentally are contradictory to one another. You can't just say, there was a... shortly after I became a Christian, I became friends with a girl named Heather, and she was a Wiccan witch, all right? So she would wear all black clothing. The black makeup was a practicing witch, all right? And then I became a Christian. And we were an interesting kind of duo because we were friends. And so I'd literally, like for the first 2 years, I didn't walk church until I was 19, so I was a Christian for 2 years without going to a church. So I would literally sit, I kind of did everything that you would do as a 17-year-old kid without Jesus in your life. So the drug scene, the party scene, all of that. And so even when I became a Christian, it took a while to stop doing that stuff. So I was a chain smoker. So I used to sit and smoke cigarettes and read the Bible out front of my school. And Heather would sit beside me all dressed in black, and she would sit, smoke, and she'd read her spells. All right, and we would literally talk about stuff. And she had this worldview, right? And her worldview was when we die, we go to Summerland, and this is how you do it, and da-da. And my worldview was, man, if you've believed in Jesus, you go to heaven. This is what Jesus has done. And we were friends. We were buddies. That was good. But here's what Heather and I never would have said. We're both right. We had the courage enough to say, either we're both wrong, and there's another religion that's right, or I'm right, or you're right. But there's no way. Your ideas are fundamentally the opposite to my ideas. This is called basic logic. Let us not lose this as a culture or society, or we will stop. It'll be terrifying where this goes. Language will fall apart. All logic will fall apart, which is where we're going out of having a heart. And I understand it. I was golfing with a guy the other day, and we were out, and he said, you're a pastor. I said, yeah. He goes, man, I don't like this. He's like, you're a Christian. You think that Jesus is the only way. And I said, yeah. He said, that's awful. Don't you know how judgmental and bigoted that is? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you mean? And he's like, no, it's not right. And I said, okay, well, what do you believe? And he said, I believe all ways are the same. I believe all ways go to God. I said, okay. But you know that half of them disagree, below the golden rule, every religion is the opposite to one another, right? Like Islam has a Unitarian version of God. Christianity has a plurality in God. There's one God, but three persons. Judaism has a very Unitarian version of God. Buddhism, there isn't even a God. Atheism, of course, there's no God. Agnosticism doesn't know. So which one of those is right? All of them. What? Wait. No, that can't be a thing. All of them. So I'm like, okay. And he told me he was an accountant. So I said, okay, let's do it this way. I said, we're talking logic, right? Yeah. I said, what is 2 + 2? He said, 4. I said, every time? Every time, of course it is. I said, what if your daughter comes home tomorrow and says, 2 + 2 equals 4, Father? This is such an offensive idea to me. I wrote it down. I did an exam, and 2 + 2, I wrote 5, and the teacher gave it wrong. She said it was wrong. How dare someone say a math problem is wrong? I feel like it's 5, Father. I will go the rest of my life thinking 2 + 2 is 5. What do you think? Would you allow her to do that? And he actually said to me, this is not a joke, yes, I would allow her to do that because 2 + 2 to 5 is her. It's fine for her because that's what she thinks. And I said, but that's not real. There's like math somewhere. Now, I'm not a mathematician or a scientist, so that was the best I had. It's somewhere. It's out there. There's like a multiplication table where it actually, in reality, like there's truth to be found. But here's where we are, because we're in a cowardice, weak cultural moment, is we say there's no such thing as truth, because of course we've had this cultural past where absolute truth has been used to oppress people. And so Freud and Marx and Foucault came along, post-enlightenment, said, you know what, we're going to create postmodernism because modernity killed a lot of people and hurt a lot of people. So ergo, anybody who believes in truth oppresses people. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say there is no such thing as truth. And that's why we're at where we're at. The problem with that is I remember when I became, so there was like a Friday night where I wasn't a Christian. We're all at my buddy's house, 30 of us in a garage, smoking weed, getting hammered, and then I became a Christian. 3 or 4 weeks later, I went back, and I'm in the same garage in front of 30 people. They're all still smoking. I'm telling them about Jesus. I'm still high because we have the garage door closed, and they're still smoking weed. But I'm telling them about Jesus now, and we've moved from this place of, and I remember one of them in the garage said, I can't believe how offensive this is. Don't you know there is no such thing as absolute truth? And I looked at him, and in that moment, the whole hypocrisy of it dawned on me, and I said, do you believe that statement to be true? And he said, of course it's true. So the only truth that our culture is willing to believe is the fact that there's no such thing as truth. You can't believe a worldview that at its core is a fundamental contradiction. You have to look for something else in the marketplace of ideas. That does not work. You're cutting off the branch you're sitting on. And so you have to look elsewhere. That's because here's what we got to understand. There are some ideas better than other ideas. That's what we can't be afraid of. When you say all religions are true, my question is always, well, which religions? The Ammonite religions that used to beat a drum while they burned babies so they couldn't hear the babies screaming in the fire? That religion? Well, no, that one's not true. Okay, what about Jim Jones, who took 900 people in Guyana and all of them drank juice and killed himself, and he took all the kids from those people and used them as slaves? Is that religion true? Well, no, that's awful. So which religions then? The modern ones, the safe ones, the domesticated ones, the ones that look like me and you, those religions? Because you got to understand there are some ideas better than others. You have to look at the marketplace of ideas and say which ideas are actually better when it comes to my wife and I were going up to Whistler to teach a marriage retreat. And I don't know if you have ever taught on marriage before, but what tends to happen is your marriage tends to not go well when you need to teach on marriage. And so we were driving up to Whistler to teach on marriage, and of course we started the fight, right? That's what happens. So we're going to teach on conflict and communication that night, and we're driving up to Whistler. We got a 2-hour drive. I'm like, okay, baby, let's go. And boom, it just starts. What are you going to say? I don't know. What are you going to say? I thought you were going to plan. No, I thought you were going to plan. And then all of a sudden it became, boom. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this. It became silence. And she looked at the window. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not doing this. I got a 2-hour drive here. I know you guys have never had that happen, but. So I'm like, now what do I do? So we sat there for 20 minutes of silence, and I hated it. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I turned on the radio, like the old school radio. Like I haven't listened to the radio. I haven't turned on the radio in 3 years. Like the radio. Not like I put on I have control over like what I'm listening to. I'm talking old school radio where there's like this metal rod on the front of your car and like beams come into it from somewhere and then stuff starts coming out of your speakers. It's crazy. So you have no control over it. Just is what it is. And so I turned on the radio, and I'm not kidding you. The song that was playing, I haven't turned on the radio in 3 years. There's 3 trillion songs in existence in the universe. I don't know if that's factual. Don't look that one up. But there's trillions of songs in the universe, and the song coming out of the radio was the song we danced to on our wedding night in front of everybody. Baby, you're all that I want. When I'm lying here in my arms, I'm finding it hard to believe we're in heaven. Now, if you don't believe in God, first off, that should prove it right there, all right? Like he literally reached through the radio and went, hey, kids, wake up. I'm still here. There should be love here. All right, now, two things happen at that moment. Because I'm close to the Lord, my heart melted. And I wanted reconciliation. Out of the corner of my eye, I see her hand come out and go, boop, and shut it off. Right? It's wicked, this woman. Because, so here's the thing. In that moment, there was two ideas. There was me saying, let's use this great moment where the Lord of the universe is speaking to us to melt our hearts and create reconciliation and soft hearts and sanctification toward one another. And she said, there are some ideas that are better than others, and mine is better than yours. Boop, still not talking to you. And it was an hour of this. There are some ideas that are better than other ideas. And we select which ideas are better than other ideas all the time. We can't then come to the moment of the most important ideas, the most important questions of our life, and say, let's pretend that all ideas are equal. That's a cowardice. That's not an enlightenment. That's us going, we don't want to ruin Christmas dinner. I say this there's people who show up to our church and they love this middle of the road Canadian nicety religion, which is like, Jesus is a good guy. Jesus is a good guy. And I'm like, wow, I read the New Testament and I'm like, man, nobody liked Jesus in the New Testament. You either loved him and gave your entire life to him, or you hated him and want to throw him off a cliff. There was never like this. So I say this, every Christmas Eve, every Easter, our church, there's thousands of people all of a sudden who show up, right? Like everyone shows up at Christmas Eve and Easter. And what usually happens is people get excited. We're like, hey, welcome everyone. We want everyone to feel welcome and warm and love and make sure everybody's And I do the opposite. I get up and I scream at all of them. And I say, what are you doing here? Last week, you didn't care about any of this. So why are you here right now? Are you here because grandma invited you over and you put on your nice pleated pants and you're going to go have turkey later? Oh, it's so nice. I did my little church service. Now I'm going to go home. We're going to have turkey. I put on my nice pants. I'll put them away until Easter. Then I'll put my nice pants on again. And we'll all sit around and we're all going to pretend that this crazy thing this guy talked about is actually legitimate. Listen, this moment that God became a human being in a baby is either the dumbest thing that a group of people could ever believe, or it's the most important. But don't tell me that it's nice and you can continue going to work tomorrow like this is a nice thing to believe, because it's not a nice thing. It's either the most scandalous, crazy idea that has to upend your sex life, your money life, the way you raise your family, the way you go to work, the way you raise, everything about your life either has to go around this thing, or it's the biggest joke and you should be picketing my church next week because I'm leading thousands of people astray and I'm brainwashing them. But don't say, Jesus is my homeboy, nice guy, like the service, go home, move on with your life. Please don't do that. That's the tragedy. Yeah. Be scandalized by this. But that's what Canadians, we won't go there. We don't let our own hearts get scandalized because we want to get through Christmas dinner. Let's just get through it. I got my nice pants on. It's a nice time. Let's do it. Let's carve up the turkey. We got to be willing as good Canadians to be scandalized by the fact that logic tells us if one idea is true, then other ideas aren't. And by the way, this kind of inclusivist mentality ends up actually being the most offensive because it's a worldview that says everybody's right except the exclusivists, which actually is an exclusivist worldview to hold. Because what you're saying is all religions are true, and in that moment, you're saying all religions are true except the religions that don't believe all religions are true. And so you're ultimately being exclusivistic because you walk up to a Muslim and a Jew and say, don't worry, you're all going to be in heaven when you die together. It's cool. They're going to be like, so why'd my grandparents die? Why are we fighting over land still? People have died for this. The ultimate offense is for you to be such a product of your cultural moment that you think because you're watching this TV, having this conversation, reading these books, having this education in 2018 in this particular part of the world, that you think your cultural moment can transcend and critique everybody else's. Be very careful, because you have to critique your own cultural moment and saying, are there things I believe right now that actually don't hook up with reality? And if so, I need to change them. Because so for instance, take sex, which Carrie talked about last week, and take love your neighbor, okay? Jesus comes along, and Canadian culture is like, we love Jesus. We think he's a great teacher, great leader, great guy. And so we look at his ideas, and we say, here's Jesus. He says, sex is something to be done in the context of the exclusive context of marriage. And it's like, okay, and then love your neighbor. Love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. Which one of those two things do Canadians love? This one, right? It's like so Canadian. It's like, oh yes, love your enemies. It's like, you can take my place in line at Tim Hortons. Go. Sorry. Right? We like this one. Love your enemies. It's good. But then what about this one? Ooh, the sex thing. I don't know, man. Have you seen my Tinder account? I swiped that and bang! This is too restrictive, but we like this. Do you know why you believe those two things? Because you are Canadian. That's your worldview. Now take those two ideas and bring them to the Middle East. And sit down and ask someone in the Middle East living in Saudi Arabia, what do you like about these two ideas? This one? This is really good. In fact, it might be a little loose. We need to really make sure we get restrictive here. Love my enemy? No, man. You don't know what they did to my grandfather. This is my land. So who's right? The guy living in Saudi Arabia? Or the Canadian sitting drinking latte, getting to decide in Starbucks which parts of God they'll take and not take? Well, I know, because I have a university education. I received these doctrines and I reject those ones. Based on what? The pizza I ate last night. That is a very dangerous way to go through life, by the way. And the ultimate tragedy in your life would be to think that you are right and everybody else is wrong, and every other culture. The ethnocentricity, the pride in that kind of position is so dangerous. Because you were saying that guy in Saudi Arabia and his feelings, they don't get to trump your feelings. Your feelings are always right. Everybody else's are always wrong. And then you bump up. See, this is where the Bible comes in. It's going to push against you and your cultural moment. And it's going to say this. So those of us who are rational, you're here, you're at this series, you're exploring God. Some of you are just seeking and wondering. Here's the beautiful thing. The Bible says, in the beginning was the Word. This is John chapter 1. And the word is the word logos, and it means logic. In the beginning was logic. In the beginning there was reason. In the beginning there was rationale that would never let two contradictory ideas be true at the same time. And yet, in the beginning was this logic. And so what did it do? What is Christianity? Is it a philosophy? Is it a set of ideas? Is it a religion? Is it a worldview? No. It's a person. What is truth? He says, in the beginning was the Word. All things were made through him. He was in the beginning. Verse 14 says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The truth, which actually ends up defining everything else, is in a person, not a set of ideas, not a set of rituals, not a set of things that you have to do to impress God, but things that God has done for you in the person and work of Jesus. That's the logic of the universe. That's the logic of your life. That's the only way everything's going to make sense. And if we accept and adopt an idea that all religions are true, everybody's views are the same, then you will not seek that. You will stop, and you won't go deep enough, and you will settle in mediocrity. Do you love mediocrity? I remember seeing a beer poster a little bit ago, and it's a picture of a big glass of beer, and it said, I would rather die of thirst than drink from the cup of mediocrity. Is that your life? Or do you just like, hey man, lowest common denominator, mediocrity, that's me, I'm good. Get through the day without a fight. Ultimate cowardice. See, people look at Christianity and go, people believe in it because it's a crutch. You believe in Christian. I was doing a Q&A in a coffee shop on Friday night somewhere. I don't know where it was. It was somewhere around here. And someone said, don't you believe in Christianity because it's a crutch? See, as a 17-year-old kid who's doing everything a 17-year-old kid does without Jesus in their life, and I was presented with the truth of Christianity, it was anything but a crutch. A crutch? You walked up to me when I was 17, I was fine, baby. I'm like, life is good. It's the opposite for a crutch. Ask a university student, what would be easier for you right now? Believing in Jesus or not? Way easier to be in university and not be a Christian. It's not a crutch, it's a cost. It's the harder way. I think the crutch, I think the weakness is the version that says all religions are true, because you never got to fight with anyone, man. You never have to have conflict in your life. You just whistle through. You just be like, yep, sure, unicorns, love it. Let's do it. But at the end of the day, the Bible goes, here's the problem. The Logos became a person. That's what you got to deal with. Who is Jesus? What did he do? The scandal of it. It should scandalize you. It should freak you out that he said there's only one way. That should totally make you say, I have to figure this out now. I can't just let this go. I can't just move on with my life. I need to actually figure out what I'm doing. And if you don't, if you just go through life without answering the scandalizing question of Christianity, it's almost, our culture is in a place, I was telling the last service, where it's almost an adventure in missing the point if we reject a truth search for everybody gets along conclusion. My daughter, we were in Disneyland. She went up to this ride. She says, I really want to go on this ride. And I'm like, okay. And she said, it's a 2-hour, 45-minute wait. And I'm like, well, okay, well, you're not going on it. And then I was like, you know what? Here's a great time where I can give her an example of good parenting. Like, you're going to sacrifice for your kids one day. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do. So I said, honey, you go out and play with your sisters. 2 hours, 45 minutes. I will sit here and I will text you when it's almost ready. You can come. She goes, thanks, Dad. Boom, takes off. I sit there for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I text my wife, okay, I'm ready. My daughter, Sienna, comes, gives me a hug. Thanks, Daddy. I said, yeah. I'm like, daughter, that's how we talk to each other. Father, daughter, daughter, one day you will do this for your kids. This will be, you shall be a sacrificial mother. You will do this one day for your children. And I'm like, this is why I did this. And she's like, no, I won't. My husband will. I'm like, okay. How young do these women learn this? Just marry a fool. He'll do it. Adventure in missing the point. Totally misread what I was putting down. This is where we're at as a culture, man. The search for meaning, which for every other culture through history has been like the central thing. What is the logos? What is the logic? What is the meaning behind all things? What is going to give me fulfillment in life? What is going to give me ultimate pleasure and delight? The ultimate motivating factor in your life, by the way, is what gives you delight and pleasure. It's the reason you married who you married. It's the reason you're sitting where you're sitting. It's the reason you're going to go to your lunch wherever you're going to go to lunch. What gives me pleasure? What gives me delight? The gospel comes along and goes, your only ultimate eternal delight is going to be found in the person and the work of Jesus, but you're trying to find it everywhere else. And if I could just weasel in and create a culture that doesn't want to go after truth because it's afraid of this, I've got him. That's the tragedy and the cowardice and why they killed Jesus and why if you follow Jesus, they might kill you too. And that would be a good thing. By the way, I came into the church, I read the New Testament and it was like, man, everybody in the early church got slaughtered, dead, killed, crucified, torn apart by lions, cut up by swords. I came into the church, I'm like, church is going to be nuts. Church is going to be crazy. It's going to be raw. I'm like walking in my circle, here we go. All right, I'm going in. I got a chain attached to my wallet because I don't want anyone to steal my $5. And I go in and I'm like, this is going to be nuts. I'm going to go in. There's going to be whips and flares. We're going to be up there like, raw. We don't know if we're going to survive. It's going to be crazy, but it's going to be awesome because it's the early church. And I walked in and everyone was so nice. Right? And we were singing worship songs, and there was like hummingbirds sucking pollen out of flowers on the worship slides. And there's a bunch of greenery around, like fake plants. And everyone was like, hold each other's hands, and let's talk to each other. Like, let's tell each other, how do you feel? How do you feel? And as like a 19-year-old man, I'm like, what do you mean how I feel? I don't feel. What are you talking about? Like, just get really close to your buddy and just tell him, hi, Joe, I really want to tell you in this prayer mushroom how I feel right now. This is really comfortable for me, by the way. Like, I literally thought, like, I read the New Testament. I'm like, what is it about? What are we going to sing about? Right? We're going to sing like crazy. It's going to be like death, blood, get your head cut off. And I came in and it was like, hey, and everything was so safe. It's like my wife and I will drive around our car. It's like you can just tell the difference between normal music and Christian radio. It's safe for the whole family, right? And I'm like, how did we get here? I was reading Matthew chapter 9, and Jesus is like, hey, I'm going to send you out as sheep among wolves. Do you know what wolves do to, like, worst shepherd ever? What, here, God, I have a wonderful plan for your life. Ripped apart, dead. I'm like, I thought the worship song, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. Ah, ripped apart, ripped apart. And everything was safe. A domesticated spirit kills Christianity. An exclusivistic spirit that recognizes in love the very narrow way of the cross and resurrection of Jesus enlightens, brings us to a place where we say there's a cost to this thing, and I got to be willing to die for this thing. And I'm telling you, some of you aren't Christians. You've gone through this series, you've come to today, you have to make a decision. You have to draw a line in the sand. And the reason you're not a Christian, it's not because you don't believe it scientifically. It's not because you don't believe it evidentially. It's because you're afraid. You're a coward. You don't want your friends to make fun of you. I know that. I remember what that was like. You don't want your coworkers to think different of you. You don't want your family to think different of you. You're afraid to follow Jesus where he's calling you to go. You're afraid. You're sitting there right now and your heart is actually beating because you're like, if I dealt with the scandal that is Jesus, my friends would leave me. My spouse would make fun of me. My family members will criticize me. I don't like what it's going to do to my sex life. I don't like what it's going to do to my money. It's cowardice. And exclusivity calls a courage out of all of us. Will you follow me to the death or continue along Canadian nicety? This is why the gospel is the ultimate offense to the Canadian heart. Father, I do pray that we are people by your Spirit and by the power of Jesus who came and died on a cross and took on the wrath of God, lived a perfect life in our place, died on a cross for our sin, and rose again from that death to give us life by the power of the Spirit that is now working in the people in this room and at the different campuses and people listening and watching this online. It's creating something in them, and I just pray that your Holy Spirit can enliven courage and kill cowardice in all of us. That we would not accept bad ideas because we belong to a cultural ethos that tells us to, but we'd be willing to kick back against them for the glory of God and for the good of people. Do that work among us, Jesus. There are people here who need to actually, at this moment, the last sermon in this series, actually cross the line, throw a stake in the ground, repent of sin, and give their life to Jesus right now on the spot, and that you would do that work among us. Change lives. Let the penny drop. Let us actually evaluate, analyze, critique, and move out of the way the thing behind the thing that's actually stopping us, so we might live radical lives. Let the scandal and the offense of exclusivity actually change us and cause faith to leap up within us rather than kill the search for truth. In Jesus' good name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thanks, guys, for having me. Thank you.